Elias noticed that I had stopped asking for his opinion on everything. An email came from work. A position had opened up at the New York headquarters and they wanted to know if I was interested. I filled out the application and hit send before I even remembered I hadn't told him. When Sarah's wedding invitation arrived, addressed to Chloe Vance and guest, I RSVP'd for one and wrote a separate check for their gift. Even the minor surgery, the one that required a hospital stay, I handled myself. I found a specialist, dealt with the insurance pre-approval, and scheduled the procedure all on my own. Elias was a surgeon. When he found out, he frowned. "You're sick? Why didn't you tell me?" The words slipped out before I could stop them. "I handled it, don't worry." As soon as I said it, we both froze. Just 2 weeks ago I was the clingy girlfriend who would text him photos of dresses and salads, agonizing over what to wear on a date or what dressing would make me fat. "This one or this one? Is this vinaigrette going to kill my diet?" He used to answer, then his replies became a curt "either one is fine," and eventually he just left me on read. I thought he was just busy, until I realized he wasn't like that with everyone. For instance, with Lily, the daughter of his late mentor, who he'd been asked to look after. "Surgery is tomorrow." The attending physician handed me the clipboard, his tone routine. "Dr. Mercer is still out of town for a conference. If you'd like to wait for him, we can reschedule." "No," I said. "Tomorrow is fine." The doctor just nodded, asking no more questions. As I walked out of the office, 2 people came down the hallway. Elias was pulling a suitcase, looking like he'd come straight to the hospital from the airport. Lily followed him, wearing a black cashmere coat over her scrubs. The Burberry one I'd given Elias for our 3rd anniversary. Elias saw me and his brow furrowed. "What are you doing here? Sick again?" That word, again, stung like a needle. He snatched the papers from my hand, his eyes scanning them with a flicker of annoyance. "I have things to do tomorrow. This isn't an emergency. We can do it when I have time." "Don't worry about it," I said. "I've already handled it." He looked taken aback. This was coming from the girl who used to video call him in tears over a paper cut, the one who sent him a dozen selfies just to pick a date night outfit. Now here I was, calmly scheduling my own surgery. If he hadn't run into me, he probably wouldn't have known until after it was over. I took the chart back, accidentally knocking a small box from his hand. It clattered to the floor, spilling its contents. "Birth control pills." "It's not what you think," Elias said, bending to pick them up. His voice was as flat as if he were discussing the weather. "They're for Lily's cramps. Doctor's orders." Lily clutched the coat tighter, her voice a fragile whisper. "I'm so sorry, Chloe. It's all my fault. My anxiety has been so bad lately. I can't sleep, I can't focus." Elias is the only one who understands. He said he couldn't leave me alone in case I did something stupid. Her voice trailed off. "You don't know what it's like. Sometimes my head is just full of bad thoughts. I can only get through it when Elias is with me. I just wish I could be strong like you." I'd heard this script before. Every time I questioned their relationship, Lily would bring up her anxiety and her bad thoughts, and Elias would shoot me a look that screamed, "How can you be so heartless?" Once I had a sharp pain in my stomach and asked him what kind of specialist I should see. This brilliant neurologist told me, "I don't know." When I complained he was being dismissive, he just pinched the bridge of his nose wearily. "Can't you just look it up yourself? You're an adult, Chloe. Can you be a little more independent? Stop relying on me for every little thing." So frugal with his words for his girlfriend, yet he personally escorted someone else to her doctor's appointments. "Well, you should take good care of her then," I said, my voice completely flat. "After all, her mental health is much more important than my surgery, right?" Lily's face flushed. "Chloe, that's not what I meant. Are you still mad?" Elias cut her off, his eyes fixed on me. "Just because I didn't tell you I was going out of town? 2 weeks ago was his birthday. I had worked overtime for weeks to get the day off, cooked a huge meal, and had the watch he'd been wanting ready and waiting for him to come home. I waited until midnight but he never showed. I only found out where he was when I saw Lily's Instagram story. He was in London for a conference. It was just a business trip, he'd said then. I don't need to report my every move to you. Birthdays happen every year, but this was a career opportunity. Don't you have your own life to worry about? Why are you always tracking my schedule? I'd lost it on the phone that night. Elias, in your world, am I always last? The least important? The one who can always be postponed? His only response was, "You're being irrational. We'll talk when I get back to Seattle." Then he hung up. I signed the transfer agreement. The HR manager watched me fill out the form, then hesitated. "This is a move to New York. That's a big deal. Aren't you going to talk it over with your boyfriend?" "No need." The last time I was changing jobs, I brought him 2 different offers to get his opinion. Elias had glanced at them and said, "It's your life, Chloe. Don't ask me to make your decisions for you." But he spent an entire weekend helping Lily rewrite her personal statement for med school so she could get a spot at the same hospital where he worked. Elias always said I wasn't independent enough, that I was too clingy. When I tried to tell him about my day, he put on his headphones to listen to a medical podcast. I was running late and needed a ride to the airport. He refused, saying his schedule was too tight to be disrupted. When I wanted to go to a party with his friends from med school, he told me I should build my own social circle. I used to think he was just a cold person, and I thought I would be the exception. Then Lily showed up. She claimed to have severe anxiety and panic attacks, and Elias's parents had asked him to look after her. I thought he'd see it as a burden, but he agreed without a second thought. She was the exception. She would text him at 3 a.m. saying her head was full of bad thoughts, and he would throw on his coat and leave. She was an intern at the hospital. He personally introduced her to his colleagues. "This is Lily, she'll be working with us. Please take good care of her." Every time I argued with him about it, he just frowned. "I'm looking after her because she's a risk to herself. You're jealous of that? Do you have any idea what she almost did?" He always stopped himself mid-sentence, leaving a heavy, meaningful silence in his wake. But I never saw Lily on the verge of a breakdown. Her anxiety only ever seemed to flare up at the most convenient times. When Elias and I had a rare date night planned. When I needed him to be there for me. When I finally worked up the courage to tell him I was unhappy. All the excuses I had made for him, it's just his personality, he's too busy with work, he hates clingy people, they all crumbled in the face of the patience and care he showed to someone else. Fine. After my surgery tomorrow, after I leave the city, Elias Mercer will be nothing to me. Sarah took the day off when she heard about my surgery. "Is the guest room ready? Your 5-star private nurse is on her way." I laughed, texting her back. "Cleaned it twice, even bought new sheets just for you. I guarantee you'll." I stopped mid-sentence. The moment I opened the door to my apartment, my brand new set of sheets was balled up on the floor. The guest room was filled with things that weren't mine. A giant teddy bear was splayed across the bed, and the vanity was cluttered with skincare products and pill bottles. A silk pajama top was draped over the back of the chair. It was a birthday present I bought for myself last year. The tags were still on, but now it was stained with a large coffee spill. The front door opened again. Lily's soft laugh drifted in. "Elias, thank you so much for taking me to that restaurant. The pasta was amazing. The tiramisu completely cured the bad mood my roommate put me in." Then Elias saw me. He said flatly, "Lily had a fight with her roommate. Her emotions are all over the place. I was worried something would happen if she was alone. She's just staying in the guest room until she finds a new place." I let out a cold laugh. "Elias, I texted you a week ago that Sarah was coming to stay." He froze. The look on his face said it all. He'd completely forgotten. When I'd asked him about it, his response had been, "You can decide that on your own. You don't need to ask me about everything." Elias's lips thinned. "I'm sorry." He held up a takeout bag, his voice softening like he was talking to a child. "We went to that new place you'll love. I'll take you this weekend." I glanced at the logo on the bag. It was the Italian restaurant I had begged him to take me to for months, but he always said he was too busy. I took the bag from his hand and dropped it directly into the trash can. Elias's face tightened. Lily rushed forward, her voice high and thin. "Chloe, this is all my fault. I've been in a really bad place lately, with nightmares and shaking. When I'm alone, you can share the room with your friend. I really don't mind." I let out another sharp laugh. I grabbed the balled-up sheets and the teddy bear, kicked them toward the door, snatched the coffee-stained silk top, and threw it all out into the hallway. Then I went downstairs and tossed everything into the building's dumpster. Lily stared, her eyes welling up with tears. "Chloe, I needed those things for tonight." I glanced toward the master bedroom and offered a sweet smile. "You can share with Elias." "I don't mind." Lily's face turned crimson, her voice suddenly shrill. "If you don't want me here, Chloe, just say so. You don't have to humiliate me like this." She burst into tears and ran out of the apartment. Elias didn't go after her. He just frowned at me. "Chloe, she just changed her medication. She's not stable. What if you trigger an episode? Who's responsible then? If you didn't want her to stay, you could have just said so. I would have gotten her a hotel. You didn't have to attack her like that." My smile vanished. "This is our apartment. Don't you think you should have asked me before you invited someone to live here?" Elias's frown deepened, as if he were looking at a completely unreasonable person. "She's having a mental health crisis, and your first thought is that I didn't consult you? She's only staying for a couple of days. Is a temporary arrangement like this really something we need to discuss? It's not like you consulted me about Sarah staying over. The old me would have called a male friend and had him stay the night, just to see his reaction. But now I just nodded calmly. You're right. It's not something we need to discuss. Fair is fair. Which meant moving to New York and breaking up with him probably didn't need a discussion either. That night I made up the guest room with new sheets, the ones I'd actually kept back from the set Lily had crumpled on the floor. I set out a towel on the edge of the bed. I put a water glass on the nightstand. Then I texted Sarah that everything was ready and not to worry about any of it. Elias went to check on Lily, wherever she'd run to, and I listened to the apartment door close behind him without any particular feeling. I sat on the edge of our bed and looked at my hands for a while. Then I started a list on my phone, things to cancel, things to transfer, things to return. It was a short list and then a longer one. The transfer to New York was already approved. The lease I'd signed for a studio apartment off Park Slope had gone through 2 days ago. I'd handled it quietly, the same way I'd handled everything for the past month, without announcement, without asking, without waiting to see if someone might ask me first. I turned off the light and lay down on my side of the bed. My chest felt like something had been removed from it, not painfully. Just cleanly. The absence of something heavy. I fell asleep before Elias came home. Sarah arrived at 9 the next morning with 2 carry-on bags and a face that immediately told me she could see everything. She stood in the doorway and looked at the apartment, then at me, then didn't say anything for a moment. I brought those pastries from that place near my hotel, she said, setting a box on the counter. And I need you to know I drove past 3 coffee shops to bring you the specific one from that place that doesn't have Sarah. I know. She hugged me, and I let her, and it was the first time in weeks I hadn't done the math on whether it was too much to need a hug. I know. How are you feeling? Surgery in 4 hours. Fine. I meant it. She looked around the apartment again, and I watched her clock what was already gone and what was still here. She didn't ask about Elias. She poured coffee and sat at the island and let me eat a pastry in silence until I was ready. He put someone in the guest room, I said eventually. I know. You texted. My silk top got ruined. The birthday one. I know that too. Sarah wrapped both hands around her mug. Chloe. What do you need from me today? For you to come to the hospital and bring those terrible magazines you like. I have 3 in my bag. Then we're good. Elias texted at 11:15. Surgery is at 1, right? I'll try to make it. I read it once and set my phone face down on the seat of Sarah's car. The surgery took 2 hours. Sarah was there when I woke up, there when the anesthesia made everything feel wool-padded and strange, there when I needed water, there when I was coherent enough to be annoyed by the hospital gown. She had her terrible magazines. We watched 40 minutes of something forgettable on her laptop and she let me use her shoulder as a pillow without making anything of it. At 3:47, Elias appeared in the doorway. He had his coat on, his hair slightly disordered. He stood there and took in Sarah, the hospital bed, the magazine on the blanket, the empty water cup Sarah had already refilled twice. I looked at him. My voice was still a little slow from the anesthesia but the words came out fine. It's handled. Don't worry. He recognized the phrase. I watched him recognize it, the small, almost imperceptible shift in his expression, something behind his eyes adjusting. He stayed for 20 minutes. He sat in the chair that Sarah vacated without being asked and made the kind of careful conversation that people make when they don't know how to be present and are very aware of it. He asked about the procedure. About the recovery timeline. Medical questions, which were the kind he was comfortable with because they had correct answers. When Sarah came back with vending machine tea, Elias stood up. I should get back, he said. Lily's had a rough afternoon. Sarah looked at him with the steady, measuring expression of someone who has been listening to a story for a while and just watched the ending confirm all her earlier suspicions. Of course, I said. He hesitated. Text me when you're home. I thought about asking which home he meant, mine, or the apartment I would be leaving in 12 days. I didn't ask. Sure. He left. Sarah sat back down, pulled her magazine open to a page she hadn't read yet, and said without looking up, whenever you're ready to talk about New York, I'm here. Thursday, I said. I'll help you pack. The next 11 days had a strange quality to them. Quiet. Not peaceful exactly, but the quiet that comes after a decision is made, when the uncertainty stops and only the logistics remain. Elias noticed. I saw it in the way he watched me sometimes, not the long, warm look of someone paying attention, but the sharper, unsteady look of someone who has just realized something in the environment has changed and cannot yet locate what. I stopped texting him about small things. I didn't mention the prescription I'd picked up, or the work call that ran until 7, or the documentary I'd watched. I didn't leave him the last of the coffee. When he came home, I said hello and went back to what I was doing. Lily called him twice while we were eating dinner. He stepped onto the balcony for the first call and into the hallway for the second. When he came back, he looked at me with a kind of searching quality, like he was waiting for the reaction. There wasn't one. He seemed, somehow, more unsettled by the absence of reaction than the reaction itself would have been. On the 9th day he sat on the edge of the bed while I was packing a box of books and said, You seem different. Do I? You're not. You used to tell me about things. Random things. Something that happened at work, a show you wanted to watch. I set a book in the box. You used to put your headphones in. He was quiet. I'm not saying that as an accusation, I said. I meant it. I was too tired for accusations. It's just what happened. Chloe, Elias. I'm tired. I'm going to sleep. He didn't push it. That was its own kind of answer about what we had become. The morning of the 12th day I got up before him. I made coffee. I finished packing the last 2 boxes, which were small, the things that accumulate in corners and on shelves and in the backs of drawers without ever quite becoming significant. A candle I liked. A notebook. The mug with the chipped handle that I'd kept because it had been my mother's. I moved it all quietly, the way you do early in the morning when someone is still sleeping. At 8, the car service arrived. I left a note on the kitchen counter. It was 5 words, I handled it. Don't worry. New York in November was cold in the way of a city that has too much concrete for warmth to accumulate. I loved it immediately, which surprised me. I had expected to feel the displacement, the loneliness, the vast reorganization of starting over in a new place. And I did feel those things. But underneath them, something I hadn't felt in a long time, the simple, steady fact of being somewhere that didn't require me to shrink. Sarah's wedding was in December, and I went alone, and I wore the dress I'd picked out months earlier without texting a photo to anyone. I danced at the reception. I cried at the ceremony because Sarah was radiant and because James looked at her like she'd personally invented daylight, and I thought, this is what it's supposed to look like. I went home that night to my apartment in Park Slope and sat on my floor with the windows dark and the city making its city sounds, and I cried a little. Not for Elias. For the years of translating myself into someone small enough to fit alongside him. For the version of me who had taken a photo of her surgical prep consent form and almost texted it, and then didn't. That girl deserved to be grieved. Then I made tea and went to bed. Adrian Hale sat across from me in the conference room for the first time on my 3rd week at the New York office. He was there for a consultant review that had nothing, ostensibly, to do with my department. He had the settled, unhurried quality of someone who had stopped needing to prove things and now just did them. He wore his suit like it was inconvenient and hadn't adjusted to caring about it. When he looked at you, you got the sense that he was actually looking. He didn't say anything remarkable in that meeting. What he did was, notice that I was pressing my hand to my side about 40 minutes in, barely, the kind of thing you do without meaning to when a recovery incision is protesting a long sit, and at the break he put a bottle of water in front of me and said nothing about it. I looked at the water. You're favoring your left side, he said. You don't have to explain. I just thought you might need it. I thought about saying I'm fine. I thought about saying I handled it. Neither felt right. Thank you, I said. He nodded and went back to his notebook. That was the first thing. The second thing was 3 weeks later. We'd both stayed late on a Tuesday, the office emptying out around us, the floor going quiet, the particular freedom of a large building after hours when you can finally think clearly. I was working through a set of numbers that kept refusing to resolve. He was doing something on his laptop 2 tables over. At some point I went to the break room and came back with coffee. I had made 2 cups by accident, muscle memory, the habitual math of 2, the ghost of a life I no longer lived. I stood with both cups in my hands for a moment. I set one on the table beside him. He looked up. Then at the cup. Then back at his work. Thank you, he said. Just that. No comment about the gesture. No reading into it. He drank it and we worked in comfortable silence for another hour, and somewhere in that hour I realized the silence was comfortable, genuinely, not as a compromise, and that it had been a long time since I'd been in a room with someone and not performed at all. He started remembering things without being told. My coffee order, black, which I'd mentioned once in passing during a group meeting. That I didn't eat lunch when I was close to a deadline. That I came in early and liked to have the first hour before anyone arrived. He left food on my desk sometimes. Not dramatically, not with any announcement, it would just appear. A container from the good Thai place around the corner. A sandwich when I was obviously forgetting. Never with a note, never requiring acknowledgement, never making me feel like I owed him anything for it. The first time I said, automatically, you didn't have to, he looked at me for a moment. I know. I can handle, Chloe. Something in his voice stopped me, not sharp, just very direct. I know you can handle it. That's not why I did it. I looked at him. Then why? He picked up his pen. Because you're going through a recovery, you're 3 weeks into a new city, and you work until 7 most nights. Because you shouldn't always have to handle everything alone just because you're capable of it. He looked back at his work. Capability isn't the same thing as preference. I stood there for a moment with the container in my hands. Okay, I said. Okay, he agreed. He walked me to the subway 3 times before I registered it as something other than coincidence. The 4th time I said, you don't live in this direction. No. It's 12 minutes out of your way. He looked at me with an expression I was still learning to read. Is that a problem? No. I know you don't need the company. I'm not doing it because you need it. There it was again. That precision. I'm not helping because you can't. I'm here because I want to be. No negotiation required, no performance of need, no price. It was the smallest, most unceremonious thing, and it recalibrated something in me that I hadn't realized was still calibrated to the wrong setting. I said, you could just say you like talking to me. The corner of his mouth moved. I could. He pressed the crosswalk button. I do. Elias called in February. I saw his name on my phone and felt, not the old pull, not the snagging grief of a thing unresolved. Something more like recognition. The name of a place you no longer live. I answered because I had decided, somewhere in the weeks of building a new life, that I wasn't afraid of the conversation anymore. Hey, he said. Hey. A pause. How are you? Good. It was true. You? Another pause, longer. I'm in New York. Conference. I was wondering if, he stopped. Could we get coffee? We met at a place near the conference hotel. He was already there when I arrived. He stood up when he saw me and looked at me the way people look at things that have changed in ways they can't precisely name. I was wearing a coat I'd bought in January, a deep green one that I liked. My hair was different. I'd cut it in December, shorter, which I'd done because I wanted to and not because anyone had an opinion about it. I had slept well the night before. I felt, in the clearest sense, like myself. You look, he stopped. Good? I suggested. Not unkindly. Different. He sat when I sat. Happy, maybe. I am. He wrapped his hands around